Hi Sam, how you doing?
Hey there.
Hi, how's things, Sam? You all right?
Yes, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Friday, thoughts turning to the weekend. Yes, I'm sure they will be with yourself as well. So yeah, no, not too bad at all. Not too bad. Just looking at what time we have actually. Yeah, not even half past yet. So
Cool. Are you saying, let me just stop that and start it again just to give it a bit of a kick. I just want to make sure you can see the presentation screen.
yes, yeah, I can. Perfect.
Excellent.
Good. Mm,
Okay, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to present. So I guess you're going to do the introduction and then I'll do the presentation. I'm then going to cut over to Firefox and run like a little example me robot
Perfect.
and then probably back to the slides because I think you've got a few at the end, haven't you?
Yeah, just a couple of quick wrap up ones at the end.
Sure.
So that's fine. I think two at the start and two at the end.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, afternoon.
Afternoon, all. I think, Claudia, are you joining us from France? Is that right?
I am. It's Claudia that's on the Agile Uprising with you.
It's
Lovely,
great.
very good.
It's great to finally put a face to the name as well, other than just a little circle on Discord.
Am I the only person not in the UK?
I think so. Yeah, as far as I know. Well, we did have someone in the States join up, but we'll see if they attend or not. So this is your international draw, Sam. There you go. Yeah, we'll just give it a couple of minutes and we'll get started just to let people in. Cool. I think we can get started then, and anyone else joining, we can kind of let in as and when they come. So yeah, welcome all. Firstly, yeah, welcome to We Are Tech. Sam, are you able to just pop to the second slide there, and I'll do a quick introduction to the group and what we're all about, really. So I suppose for those that are new to the group, we're obviously a tech meetup, and the aim is to cover a broad range of topics to include all, depending on what your kind of taste flavour is, and what you're interested in. So we're based out of the Northeast, in the UK, in England, but we are really open to everyone, regardless of location, as we've seen today. We're reaching out internationally, which is really, really great. And again, obviously the online function does really let us, reach out to just about everywhere, to be honest. But of course, we'll look to do some local events as well, at some point when it's safe to do so. So yeah, 2 seconds. So yeah, I think a big thing about the group is that we'd really like to have your input. So if you would like to suggest a topic, please do so. You can do it via the meetup page, or contact myself or Russell Cracksford directly on LinkedIn. And of course, we'll do our best.
You've gone on to mute.
Yes. Okay. Apologies. So yeah, I don't know how much you got of that, but we, as I said, we're based out in the Northeast, regardless of location, we can reach out to a lot of people as we're all currently online. We will look at hosting something locally, face to face, when it's safe to do so. Again, a big point of the meetup is that we want people to participate and give us their input. So if there's something you'd like to hear about, or indeed if you'd like to speak, we'd love to be able to facilitate that as well. I'll say at this point, we'll add the recording to our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be visible, I'd say then do switch your camera off. And quickly, a thanks to Segeza, who are kindly sponsoring the group. So yeah, if we can pop to the next slide, I'll run through the agenda, which is very straightforward. Introduction to We Are Tech. We can tick that off. Obviously then Sam will go into his talk, which will be roughly about 45 minutes. Then we'll have some Q&A. So what I would say is, even as we go, if you've got any comments, do write those in the box in the comment section in the chat, and we'll kind of moderate that and put them to Sam when we finish. And then, yeah, once that's done, we'll kind of wrap things up and have an overview of some upcoming events. Yeah, and then obviously any more questions you have from there. Okay, so I think without further ado, that's enough from me. Over to Sam.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. It's great to see you. I know a few of you as well, either virtually or physically, and it's good to catch up. I've got the back door shut, so hopefully I don't have the cat running in and jumping on the keyboard, which has been a real risk since I've moved into this room. I'm going to be talking today about a really cool technique called example mapping that I discovered in a previous role. Essentially, we were having lots of problems with formal requirements documents being thrown over the wall and quite a lot of process being introduced around asking questions about that and fully understanding the work that we were being asked to do. And I was researching ways we could improve communication between different functions of the business and also try and help us on our journey to improve automation, focusing on business rules rather than automating manual test scripts. And example mapping is really nice because it sits in kind of both worlds, as I'll go through. What I'm looking to do today is cover a bit of theory about why example mapping is needed in the first place. I'll be kind of challenging a few preconceptions about how user stories are used in the wild. I then talk about how to run an example mapping session, because I imagine most of the people here are developers, QA, maybe on the business side of things, or involved in running agile events like Scrum Mastery. So we'll be wanting to learn how to take part in these or even facilitate these kind of sessions. And if we have a bit of time, I've also got a Miro board, and we'll open the floor and actually run through an example and see what we can come up with together. So just to start off with, I am working at a relatively new consultancy in the UK, in Poland, and now in Canada, called Test Driven Solutions. I'm the head of software development there. My job is to basically make sure that the developers and the testers within the org are happy, looked after, and that we're making sure we're delivering the right outcomes for our clients. We are growing and we have a huge amount of work coming in. So I'm going to put the mandatory recruitment slide up to begin with. We're looking for Java, Scala, .NET devs at the minute. We're looking for automation testers. And I'm also looking to build out some of the tech leads that we have within the team as well to work with me on new business and helping our existing clients. So if you are interested in moving, then please give me a shout. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you. Let's get into why we're really here. So firstly, I can't take any credit for this idea. This is a technique that was developed by Matt Wynne, who is an agile coach and is working with the Cucumber team. So really involved in behavior-driven development, really involved in kind of developing those techniques out there in the real world. And what I really like about it and what I found is, like I said, it's a useful tool for kind of bridging the gap between different functions of the business, getting everybody to speak in the same language and understanding the same things about the work we're being asked to do. If I was to summarize it in a sentence, example mapping is a way of having a structured conversation to explore a user story. And we do this through illustrative examples. What's really nice, and I know especially in the days of plague, we're having a lot of meetings online, a lot of time is being taken up staring at each other's faces on a screen. This is something that shouldn't take more than about 25 minutes. So it's something that you can slot into a day relatively easily. It's not going to massively disrupt your flow from other activities that you need to do. And because it's literally a drop-in thing, it doesn't have to massively disrupt how you're already doing things. It's not as if you're having to adopt an entirely new framework or methodology. You can just put it right into what you're doing now. And that means it's something you can do several times a week as a kind of progressive refinement of upcoming work. All right, so why do we need this? I think the reason why is we're starting to get this maybe enterpriseation of agile. This idea that what we can do is we can take existing business concepts like requirements and just simply map them to what the new agile word is for these things. And the kind of word for requirement now is user story. But actually, these are very, very different things. If I normally assume that Scrum is kind of the common agile framework that people use. User stories aren't a Scrum thing. Scrum talks about product backlog items and sprint backlog items. User stories themselves came from XP. And if you go back to the XP source material, the documentation on the C3 wiki and all that kind of stuff, what you'll actually see is that user stories aren't requirements, they're placeholders to have a conversation. It's really common to see a user story, for example, a Jira ticket, containing a huge amount of detailed requirements, with teams only accepting a user story if it has detailed analysis done on it. Like, actually, user stories are a radically different way of thinking about the work that we want to do. They are deliberately lightweight entities. I like to think of them as a vacation photograph. They're simply there to jog my memory. So from this photograph, which I took at a Christmas market in Germany, you might say, okay, that it looks like you've had some really cool, slightly alcoholic hot chocolate there with some cream on the top. What I can tell you from that photograph is a huge amount more. I can tell you that my foot was hurting that day and I was in quite a lot of pain. I can tell you what the weather was. I can tell you the things we were doing before and after that. I can remember and recall a huge amount of context. And that's because it's doing its job. It's acting as a placeholder for the conversation. The whole point of working in an agile way is that we're not doing a huge amount of work up front. We always prioritize our work, and we prioritize completing stuff that's more important over stuff that isn't. With using user stories as a placeholder technique, what we are actually doing is deferring work. We are deferring the analysis of the story until the point it's prioritized for delivery. If I do a huge amount of detailed analysis breakdown on some work, and it's put straight at the bottom of the backlog, and it stays at the bottom of the backlog for about 3 months before it becomes important, the world might have changed in that time. And the analysis we've done, whilst not entirely irrelevant, will have to be looked over again. More work, rework will have to be done, which is wasteful. So essentially, we have the card, the thing that jogs the conversation, and we have the conversation as well. And what comes out of that is some understanding that we can use to confirm the work is done. A user story is a representation of some kind of user need and a desired outcome. We talk a lot in the Agile community about writing user stories, but actually that's the wrong way of seeing it too. The whole point is that customers, users, whoever they are, should be telling these stories. What we are trying to do with all of this stuff, rather than working in plain old requirements documents, is develop a shared understanding around user stories. Developing the shared understanding is crucial, and we simply can't get this by circulating a document. It's effectively, if you write a big document and pass it around to people, everyone is going to have a different interpretation of that. You know, even outside of work, even if you read The Lord of the Rings, for example, everybody's going to read that text and come up with different things, find different meanings. You know, there's kind of no one correct interpretation of these works. And that's not particularly helpful, because what we want to do is understand what we're being asked to deliver so that we can do the right things. And the most effective way to reach this shared understanding is actually through having conversations with each other. This is right in the Agile Manifesto. It's one of the principles. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within development teams is through face-to-face conversation. Putting all this together, thinking about it slightly differently, what we end up with is quite a powerful conclusion. The quality of our conversations drives the quality of our product. And I'll show you how this works, basically with a flow diagram. Example mapping is essentially a tool that we can have to have better conversations with each other. So think of it this way. If we consider a traditional waterfall environment, the old straw man, and it's an environment where business functions are segregated by activity and work is handed off between them. What we are effectively doing is limiting the chance to gather feedback. We've put in place formal gates through which feedback is communicated and work is handed off. The entire reason behind the Agile Manifesto and the kind of principles and everything that's developed from this is to have techniques to make sure that we get fast feedback early and often so that we can build the right thing. You see, a lot of testing isn't about finding bugs. Some people say it's about preventing bugs happening in the first place. Testing is therefore about reconciling misunderstandings. It shouldn't be a last gasp gatekeeping activity prior to a release. Instead, it's a continuous process that happens throughout the life cycle. It's about asking questions, being curious, having an open mindset, speaking with candor, all of these things. And we've developed a lot of kind of language and concepts around this. We call this shift left testing. We've developed techniques like Three Amigos of putting the business, the quality focused people and the developers in the room together to talk about the work that's being done. Actually, example mapping fits really well as a way of having that Three Amigos session. We have developed practices such as test-driven development and behavior-driven development, where we focus on the behaviors that we want to implement, and we use those to drive how we develop, rather than thinking theoretically about all the possible things that we could build and then building a super generic thing on top of them. We focus on the user and on the outcome. And from the XP community, turning things up to 11, we're starting to see pair programming and even mob programming, where we all focus as a team on delivering the next most important outcome. Putting all of this together, the earlier in the process that we align our understanding, the cheaper and easier it is to correct errors. And we can do this even before development, software development, has started. If we find out we're building the wrong thing, we can pivot easier, quicker, cheaper. Right, so into example mapping itself. It's a deliberately lightweight thing. What I like about it is that all it takes is some people and some Post-its. The only kind of requirement really is that the Post-it notes are some different colors because they represent different things. Like I said, this is a really good technique to use in these Three Amigo meetings. So if you have those set up already, why don't you try taking a user story and just doing this at the next one of those you have booked in. So the idea is that somebody from the business usually will bring a user story to the table. Start off with one for now. We may split out other stories as we explore this space. That's absolutely fine. But remember that this is a 25-minute thing. This is meant to be a very focused session. What we would do is outline any rules that we already know about this story. We normally don't come to the group with something that's entirely unknown. There are a few things up front that we know about the work that we need to do. We use a blue Post-it note to identify rules. You can consider these similar to acceptance criteria. They are the business functions that are at play. And in order to help us understand these rules and basically deepen our knowledge of what is being asked of us, we will use green Post-it notes to illustrate these rules with concrete examples. Anybody can propose an example. It's not just purely on the business people. The purpose of an example is to represent different possible situations that could be encountered for this rule. What they're effectively showing you is an interesting application of it. The purpose is to clarify and leave no room for ambiguity. What they're trying to do is help us understand the rules, demonstrating that the development team know what they're being asked to do, but also, and crucially, that the business understand the implications of what are being asked before. So, like I said, anybody can propose examples, and all you need to do is start asking questions. Sometimes, as we ask these questions, we may realize we don't know the answer to them, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we do need to go away, do some thinking, and come back when we have the answer. And sometimes we may have assumptions as well. Like, in order to make progress, we're just going to assume that the state of the world looks like this. So you can use red Post-it notes to highlight these questions and assumptions. Remember, this is a 25-minute session, so we're not necessarily going to have the time to go away and answer these questions. If we know the answer, we can say it and move on. But the important thing is about keeping the conversation moving. So write them down on a post-it note and move on. We can always reconvene. If it's only 25 minutes, it's not that big of an ask. We're interested right now in maintaining the flow of exploring the user story. And through this kind of successive process of illustrating rules with examples and asking questions, we may discover new rules, which we will illustrate with more examples. The purpose here isn't necessarily to generate authoritative and exhaustive exploration of every possible scenario. What we're doing is trying to do just enough to gain a shared understanding. Some rules may be so obvious to everybody in the room that they stand put without examples, and that is perfectly okay. The whole point is just making sure we all are on the same page. As the session develops, it becomes really interesting because what you can do is look at the shape of your whiteboard, whether it's virtual or physical, and that can give you clues as to what to do next. If you have lots of different business rules, maybe your user story is too big, and maybe it's kind of holding too much behavior in it, and we could perhaps split that into several user stories which are more focused. Likewise, if we are documenting a particular business rule with a huge amount of examples, then maybe that rule itself is actually an aggregation of several smaller rules which need to be called out and identified as new entities. And again, this will help us deepen our knowledge of what's actually going on. And if we generate lots of questions or assumptions, that's a clear signal that further research is required here. We do need to go away and do some thinking, or maybe some prototyping, or go and get some user research or something like that in order to progress. Either way, we come out of this with more information than we went in with. Once you reach the time box, have a group vote, just thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this story now ready for development? And if the answer is no, that's fine, because at least we've gone through the process of understanding the story a bit more. So we still should be a bit clearer about what needs to be done in order to get that story ready for development. Like maybe we need to split it up, maybe we need to do some research or have some conversations, like I said, or maybe we need to just go away and do a bit of a spike. Right, now, how do you actually propose and write examples? So the general format for these, and you can do this however you want, this is a recommendation. Generally, the format takes the form of a 3-act play, a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's some kind of context, which is the state of the system before some action takes place. And then there's an action, an event which causes the behavior we're talking about, which produces an outcome, and that's the state of the system afterwards. Now, if you're a programmer and you're really used to writing automation tests, you may be thinking about given, when, then, in terms of like Selenium tests or something like that, yeah? Or if you're a Scrum Master or maybe a product owner, you may be thinking, this fits really nicely with as a I want, so that, and it does. But let's not focus too much on the formal language just yet. If we focus on that too much early on, it risks derailing the conversation, derailing the flow, and it can help over-specify examples. We'll do all that stuff later in more targeted sessions. But right now, it's purely about getting the examples on the board. So like take a step back from the formal language, still think about beginning, middle, end, absolutely. But don't worry too much about the exact wording you use. As long as everybody understands, you're good at this point. Concrete examples are a really great way of just developing little pieces of shared context. So you could think of like user personas here, Harry the hacker or Frida the frequent flyer, as ways of being, okay, we don't have to write the same thing again and again and again. We know that if Harry is performing some action, he's probably trying to achieve some undesirable outcome. Focus on data that is purely relevant to this rule at hand. If you're filling out a complex form and you're testing or you're thinking about the one particular field in that form, you don't need to supply the huge amount of context beforehand. It's not relevant that they put value X in field 1 and value Y in field 2 if you're only focusing on field 7. Focus down on just what's important for this example. And try and use language that's in the business domain. The thing with business analysts and product owners and stuff is they are experts too. They are well versed in the language of the business, and communicating this language with the developers and the testers will help avoid misunderstanding and will help clarify intent. We are building more domain experts by doing so. Be careful when using data. Real world data is great. Like I said, it's got to be relevant to the situation at hand. The kind of useful guide I have there is, if I change the value of this particular piece of data, will it make a difference? If it doesn't need to be there. You're over-specifying. And from a testing point of view, although this isn't just the testing activity, some good examples to think about are happy and unhappy paths. So we could think about not just what is going to be the perfect workflow, but what happens if some stuff goes wrong along the way. Think about what happens if the context changes. Can we still get the same outcome? What happens there? Like, that might indicate that there's more rules that we need to highlight. There are several paths which can lead to the same outcome, and they are actually different things that need to be called out. Or think about the same context. Could the same context, the same initial state, produce different outcomes? So, for example, if I am going to send Claudia €1,000, what happens if I change if I put an extra zero in there and do €100,000? Okay, well, a business person may chime up at this point and say, actually, you've now exceeded the faster payments limit. So what we need to do is send that payment via a different means, via something like CHAPS, and that's going to incur a cost. So just purely through talking about these real world examples, you've actually pulled apart there are two business rules at play, because how we process the payment and what the impact is on the customer differs depending on the amount that's being sent. We can't just assume that all amounts are equal in terms of business flow. And that's a simple example, but it shows you the power of just changing some of the data values and seeing what happens out the other side. I've always found that like naming examples is really good. So we have effectively a quicker way of referring to them. Matt recommends naming examples after Friends episodes. If you haven't seen Friends, all the episode titles begin with "the one with." So you can think of the one where, the one where the network cable gets plugged out, the one where the user's typed in the wrong value. It's a quick way of just referring to these. And if you need to think about similar situations in different contexts, you can easily call back. As you've probably noticed, this is a process that happens right at the start. This is right before we've done development work and we're thinking about how to build it. We're just here talking about the work itself. In BDD terms, this is a process of discovery. It's where we are establishing a shared understanding through collaboration. Now, I mentioned don't focus too much on the formal language. It will happen later. That happens at a subsequent stage called formulation. And this probably doesn't need the whole team, but this is where maybe a developer pair have picked up some work and they're ready to start developing on it, what they can do at this point is start taking those examples from the post-it notes and start applying the formal language to them to turn them into scenarios. Once we've got that formal language in place, we can then start using the given when thens, or the as I, so I want to, so that. We can use that structure to then power automation. So we get the third C of user stories, the confirmation. We have turned the example into a formal scenario. We can then use that scenario to write a test, which goes green when we've delivered the outcome that we wanted to. And it's important that in order to have good automation, you have to recognize you need good formulation. Like I said, in one of my past roles, all of our automation was based off manual test scripts. It was really hard to follow. It wasn't clear what they were actually testing. It was all just click this, click that, do this. Who knows what's happening? And that's because we didn't have this good formulation. We didn't express the requirements of the work well enough through formal scenarios. And we always struggled to do that because we weren't doing good discovery of the work. We weren't having these conversations and illustrating them up front with examples. So we were trying to reverse engineer these from requirements documents and naturally interpreting things differently and finding holes that hadn't been thought about. So you kind of need to do this in the right order all the way through the process. Right, that's enough from me. What I want to do for the next couple of minutes is take a really, really simple demo. I'm building a new system. I'm the head of a company. I want an automated system that I type an employee's name into, and it's going to generate their email address. So allow me to just switch over to my Miro board. Right, so can you all see that now, just to check?
Yep.
Excellent. So don't worry, you don't all need to join Miro. I'm happy to be the transcriber for this bit, but I am going to need your help. So I'm going to act as the business owner on this piece of task, and I'm going to start off by saying, well, the rule is I want, if we're talking about the prefix of the email, the first bit, the bit before the at, I just want it to be the employee's name. So we'll say the prefix is the first name plus the surname. Okay. And, okay, I guess I need some kind of example. So, all right, whatever. We've got a new employee, Sam Hogarth, and when we generate an email, then the prefix is going to be sam.hogarth. There we go, job done, right? Go and do the story. Tell me when it's done. What I'd like to do at this point is open the floor. I'd like you to have a think about any other examples that you could think about, anything that you need to call out. And what we'll do, I think, until about 1:15 is let's just see how we can develop this out. So feel free to either type in the chat or unmute your microphone and speak up.
A hyphenated last name?
Yeah, good one. Okay, so let's call it out as a separate example here, because I would say it's, how do I type? I'm going to say I think that kind of fits the same kind of business rule. Now, I'll take your name. So what we'll see, I'll spell that correctly. Is it'll look like that. So if you've got a hyphen in your name, we want to respect that and we want to include that in the email address too.
What if somebody already has the same name?
Right, okay, that's a really good one. So Oh, could you think of an example?
So if someone existed with the same name, then they would have like a 2 appended to it or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about that. That doesn't seem to fit, does it, in this existing rule? So it seems like what we've done there is we've discovered a new business rule. So let's call that out. I'll grab another blue. So we'll, how do I move that particular post-it note? Like that. So we'll say, ambiguated, is that a word? It must be a word. Is disambiguated with a number. So if we take this example, already new employee called Sam Hogarth, and it's already employed with that name. So what we'll do is we'll generate them an email of Sam Hogarth 2. Ooh, what if they have a middle name? So what if we had an employee called Austin Danger Powers, but we already had an employee called Austin Powers without the middle name? Should we use the middle name rather than the number? Let's have a think about that, and we will say, actually, no, we're going to keep this. We're going to keep the schema really simple. It's going to be name, first name, surname. Middle names don't get included. So this person would be Austin Powers 2. What about the use of letters outside the traditional 26? Right, so this, so let's kind of take another example here. And just because I know the old characters for Denmark, don't ask why. Let's say that we have a new employee who is called Søren Ulrich. I probably insulted Scandinavia there. And we want to generate an email. Well, we've decided that we should respect hyphens and apostrophes and whatnot in surnames. We should respect the characters in kind of the non, well, is it ASCII or is it UTF-8? I always forget. I think it's ASCII. Outside the initial ASCII range. So what we're going to do is we're going to say their email is going to be Søren Ulrich, the prefix that is. This might be a point where a developer says, actually, we're using a really, really old version of Exchange, which is pre-2012. So it doesn't have the International Email Standard Extension format, which supported this stuff. So we're on the really old system that doesn't actually support these special characters. Now, that's a good piece of knowledge to know up front before we've started writing acceptance criteria and setting up people's emails and all that kind of stuff. So we may actually go back at that point and then say, okay, we're going to have to anglicize their name, unfortunately. But that's still worth documenting up front, and it's now clear what the ask is. That's a really good one to call out, actually. What about users whose cultures order their surnames first name? That's a really good one. I might be comfortable saying that actually what we're doing is we're taking these names in from a feed, so that we've got an existing process which handles on borders. we don't get the information in that way or the cultural context. We just get first name, last name. So that's not something we support. Or we could start writing some examples for that. It's a really good thing to call out as well. New rules could be no surname at all, and first name, surname, more than a specific number of characters. Absolutely. So in Spain, for example, it's really common to have very, very long surnames. You basically take different family names, combine them together. What happens if we run out of some kind of character limit there? Do we have to shorthand them in some way? Do we have to do something a bit more creative, like use their initials or something like that? I'm aware that we've got 1 minute left, so rather than drawing on the board, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on a question, because somebody's going to have to take that away and see, do we have any employees with this name already that we're going to have to support? So really long surnames. Nobody on the technical team knows the limit of the prefix of an email address. Nobody knows if this is going to be a problem yet. So we can take that away as a red item. And the other direction too, would there be a minimum character length? It could well be. I'm not well versed in the email spec. That might be something we have to go away and think about. What I do know is there's a fantastic site called Falsehoods Programmers Believe About Names, which is a big list of all the incorrect assumptions that we hold about how names are structured. And I think it even has at the end, an incorrect assumption is that somebody has a name. You know, people change their names all the time. They get married, they change their identity, all this kind of stuff. And you can see how the conversation can really get into the nitty-gritty of things. You can see how we're actually testing what we will eventually write at this point. We're starting to think about that stuff before we've actually developed software. Like that's awesome. That's really, really powerful. And we may identify some of this work as not in scope right now. That's perfectly reasonable. But we also allow it to come up with like what I find is a decent focus for kind of exploring a particular user story. And that's the thing, it didn't require a huge amount of effort there. Like there was no prep that went into that other than register an employee's email address with a really rudimentary example. And we're already starting to talk about, you know, different cultural contexts and different character sets and all that stuff, which is really, really awesome. You don't want that to happen at the last minute when a QA happens to start messing around with the Alt key and pressing numbers. Okay, so if I just jump back to my presentation on the correct screen. So that was pretty much all I had for you this lunchtime. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask?
When you've run this, was it you suggesting it, or did the team members express a need for it?
So I took this one to the team, but that was because I was on that team, and the need I was trying to solve was I was really struggling to write decent automation tests. And through researching, I realized that's because I was having to reverse engineer the requirements into formulated scenarios. So maybe what we need to do is basically surface that to the business and say, what we're trying to do is we're trying to capture the acceptance criteria in an automated way, so we know where we've broken it. And it would be helpful for us if we could try and phrase the work that we need to do with that in mind. So it's basically working back through that automation, formulation, discovery process. And yeah, being in the kind of environment where if you propose a problem, you also have to propose a solution. This is kind of what I took to the table.
Hey, Sam.
Hey, Rob.
So you mentioned there the kind of falsehoods programmers believe about names thing. So you have any thoughts as to how you might integrate, I guess, that sort of like research or quite detailed expertise maybe into this kind of process?
So part of it is a little bit of upfront communication. So people aren't going into an example mapping session with zero context like we've just done there. You know, you will potentially have something on the board already, which may have a little bit of detail tagged along. So if you kind of communicate in advance, we're going to be doing an example mapping session on this particular topic here. It gives people the time to do a little bit of exploration and research themselves. So a tester might get into the frame of mind of thinking through all the properties of an email address. A programmer might start looking at the specification or looking into the systems to see what constraints they're aware of that they can bring to the business. So I guess all of these techniques are about having better meetings, and to have better meetings, you do actually need things like agendas, and you do need space to do a little bit of prep, and that I think is really key.
No, great points. Cheers.
Okay, cool. If there are no more questions, then I mean, I'm happy to have conversations about this stuff all day. You can look me up on LinkedIn or on Twitter, or you can email me, sam.hogarth@testdrivensolutions.co.uk. More than happy to talk about this stuff afterwards as well. Thank you very much for listening, and I guess John or Martin, back over to you. I think you're still muted, mate.
There we go. Yes, so listen, thanks for that, Sam. Very insightful. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. So just a really quick wrap up from myself. As you can see there, we've got a couple of events coming up. So Kubernetes 101, and then workplace culture and COVID after that, which I'm sure is, affected us all, certainly. So both are on the meetup page. So feel free to go on and subscribe to both those. I think just lastly as well, again, if there's anything you'd like to hear about, we're here to facilitate you and the community. So if you want to speak, if you've got ideas for topics, do get in touch via the meetup page, LinkedIn, or directly. My email address is on the meetup page as well. So, and lastly, recording of today's event will be on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back through that, then feel free to join up. And listen, thanks again to everyone for coming. Big thanks again to Sam for taking the time. Hope you all have a good weekend, and hope to see you all again soon.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Cheers, Sam. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.